Welcome to the Period Besties Podcast with Stasha and Katie. Think about it as chatting with your best friends about all the TMI stuff you've never talked about before with two period coaches who've been helping hormones collectively for over 20 years now. I'm Stasha.
And I'm Katie, and we're pulling back the curtain on what it's like in the world of menstrual coaching. From puberty to menopause and everything in between, we're here to show you how period coaching can save the day. We'll share practical tips and information you can put to immediate use to improve your hormones and happiness.
We're removing the mystery, ending the taboo, and shining a light on just how powerful period coaching can be.
So whether you need period coaching or are considering becoming a period coach yourself, these episodes are going to help you. We'll share stories, coach live on air, and bring smart, savvy guests to share their wisdom too. Let's start today's episode.
Welcome back, Period Besties. We have a live coaching session today for you all with Christy, a friend of mine from LA, and we are going to chat all about her journey. So, Christy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of the podcast. It's been super helpful for me in my hormone journey. So really appreciate you both.
Yes, we're so excited to have you here with us. So let's start from the very beginning. When did you start noticing things were shifting and changing? And how did you notice that?
Yeah. So I was one of those people, we were all in this age range. I'm 42 now. I was on the pill for a good decade, starting at 16 or 17. And then when I started really getting into health and wellness and becoming a health coach myself, I was learning a lot about hormones, or at least a little bit about hormones. And so I was like, I'm going to get off the pill. I want to see what my body feels like. That went terribly. I did ultimately get off it and stay off of it. I had all the mood swings, irregular periods, probably skin issues, stuff like that. But after a few months, it normalized and I was having a very regular cycle. So that was like around 27, I think. And then I had my daughter when I was just before I turned 34. And at that point, I was like so in sync with my cycle. And I was like, I'm ovulating today. Like today's the day. And then I was pregnant. So I was like, it was very regular, very in sync. I would say it was about 36, maybe 37 latest when I was like really starting to notice some changes and was having much shorter cycles for a while. And I would go to the doctor, my primary care and my OB, and mention, is this perimenopause? This seems early, but it seems like I'm having perimenopause symptoms. And they were definitely like, oh, no, you're quite young. And even if you are, it's normal. But did some blood work, had a couple of ultrasounds, like stuff like that. So they were checking the boxes, but there was nothing else wrong. But I was just noticing the irregular cycles to start and just the inability to manage stress as well as I had. And meanwhile, my life has been very stressful the last 8 years since my daughter was born. She has some special needs and had a lot of medical stuff, especially when she was younger. So there was a lot of stress going on. And so I'm quite sure that has impacted the journey and maybe escalated the timeline. But fast forward to, I would say probably 2 to 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, the cycle started getting wildly irregular. So like I would have a period every 2 to 3 weeks, and then I wouldn't have it for 45 days, back and forth. And then this past year, and I've been tracking it in terms of a calendar. I use an app and I track a calendar. So then I started looking back and okay, it was getting really short, and then it started getting longer, and then short, and then long, and then short. And then I looked at the past year in beginning of February, and I had basically only half my periods. So like I would go 2 months, and then I would maybe go 3 weeks, and then I'd go 30 to 60 days. But there was like 3 points where it was like full 60 days, and then 90 days went by. And that's when I was like, okay, this is not good. But also in that 90-day period, it's extremely stressful. So November, December, January, I didn't have a period at all. My daughter started having seizures, but we didn't realize they were seizures yet. And then they continued to build, and she was finally diagnosed with epilepsy on Christmas Day. As you can imagine, that was like a very stressful period. And there was other health issues going on in my family at the same time. And so it wasn't a surprise to me that I hadn't had a period. But after looking back at the year and being like, wow, this is becoming a real pattern. And then also noticing like I'm having a lot of other symptoms. And that had been building over the last 2 to 3 years, like irritability, some rage moments that were like really scary to me because I'd never felt that way before. A little bit of depression here and there, but very much like coming and going. It wasn't like a long-term thing that I had to treat. It was like definitely cyclical. And then the month of January this year, like I attributed at first to just coming off of this really stressful period with my daughter. And I like started therapy mid-January, all this stuff. And then I finally got my period like the last week of January. And it was like the weight was lifted. I was like, oh my God, I feel so much better, you know? So I was like, okay, clearly this is a big part of it. So there was a lot going on, but it was like, I can't deny that this is perimenopause, but also just like really rocking my world right now. A couple other things to mention are that 2 years ago, out of nowhere, I started having weird breathing issues, like a little bit of constricted breathing. And in that last 2 years, I went through like a series of ENT tests, scopes, PFT tests, like pulmonology breath tests, blood work. I've tried various inhalers, I've tried various medications. Nothing seemed to be helping. So they finally diagnosed me with like full-blown asthma. But I also was like, it was clearly related to allergies. I got tested for allergies and it was like, you're allergic to everything, pretty much. And that was not like I've had allergies in the past, but nothing like this. And so it's been really impacting my life because like in the winter, the cold weather really makes it worse. I can't even take a walk outside like all winter. So then I finally started on an injectable medication for asthma about a month ago. Around the same time, I started listening to your podcast and some others and started learning that, oh, asthma out of nowhere in perimenopause age could be very linked to your hormones. But nobody ever mentioned that in all of those tests that I did, all the doctor's appointments. So that to me is like really interesting. So that's been the journey up to now. And then I'll pause if you have any questions or comments, and I can tell you what I've done about it.
That's a lot. So
Thanks.
our hearts just go out to you because that's a long journey of just feeling up and down and like everything going on with family. We all know how emotional stress and physical stress, all of it just impacts who we are and how we show up. So we're just sending you a big hug because
Thank you.
I think we all just need to be really empathetic and with each other going through whatever journey we're going through. And when you have children and or animals or anything in your life outside of yourself, like it takes on a whole other level of the emotional side of it. As caretakers, there's no way to not feel everything that people you love feel.
Yeah, and it's been so interesting because I've been like trying to watch my health and hormone journey along the way from like another lens, because having done like a hormone training course back in the day and really trying to like tune into that when I was like wanting to get pregnant and stuff like that, I've always known that, okay, I'm trying to watch this, but when you're in it, it's also impossible. So I feel like I should be feeling this way and doing this to feel better when you're just like inundated by external things. And so in January, my therapist was like, you have caregiver fatigue. And I was like, yes, I do. But I also have a lot going on with my hormones. So yeah, it has been tricky to decipher where symptoms and feelings are coming from. But at the end of the day, trying to still feel empowered that either way, it's not normal, right? Either way, it doesn't feel good. Either way, I need to, if there's something I can do about it, I want to take action. So after that whole experience in January, coming out of it, I was like, all right, I got to get on this. And so that's when I started doing a lot more research, reading books, listening to podcasts, including yours. And I was like, all right, I'm going to make a game plan because I knew going back to my doctors, like I might not get the help or support I needed. So I needed to be really prepared to like a little lucky, I think, with the OB that I have because I started with a new one a year ago via a recommendation from a friend. But I didn't know what her stance was going to be around perimenopause or HRT or any of that. And sorry, so I should say before that, I've always been trying to like eat healthy for my hormones. I'm definitely doing a lot of changes right now, which is the biggest thing I'd love support from you guys on today is like, how do I put all the changes I'm trying to do together and optimize it moving forward. Because I'm like making a ton of changes all at once, which I know isn't always the best idea, but felt like what I needed to do to feel good about it. So doing things like starting to do more weights. I've never been into weights. Like I'm yoga and I'm walking and that's my stuff. So like weights to me is like a whole new thing, but I'm actually starting to really enjoy it. Started seed cycling last month, so I was excited about that. So I booked a call with my OB outside of my annual exam that's coming up end of April. I didn't say I'm having perimenopause. I said I'm having symptoms, irregular periods, that kind of thing. I got a virtual call because that's what they had available sooner. And I just went in and I was like, look, here's the laundry list of symptoms. Here's the history. Here's what I've been learning. I was very clear, like, I've been doing my research. And I was like, I really think at this point, I want to have the HRT discussion. Before that, she had sent me a lab slip, which I thought was amazing because I don't think most doctors would do that. But like when I booked the appointment, she had her nurses send me a lab order, which was small. It was only FSH, TSH, and free T4 for thyroid, and then estradiol. But it was enough to get the conversation started. And so when I got the blood work back, and she had me go on day like 3 to 5 of my cycle, which I just happened to have had like the lamest period ever, but it was fun. I was like, is this one? I don't know. I'd never had one that like light, but just happened to be the right timing. Got the blood work done. Came back, FSH was 22. And after listening to the podcast, I was like, oh, and it said right on the lab slip, perimenopause. And I was like, at least now we have some validation. That felt good to see the word out there. So I think that was helpful going into the appointment. My estradiol was like 105, and then the thyroid I'd love to talk about later. But at the end of the day, I gave her my whole spiel. She was like, yes, you're in perimenopause. We can officially say that. And yes, you started pretty early. And yes, you're likely going to hit menopause by the time you're 45. And I was like, okay, yikes. I know that's like the early range. It's not totally abnormal, but feels young to me. I also mentioned my sister, who's 4 years older than me, is having the same issues. And she's probably even further, not necessarily further along in her timeline, but her symptoms are probably even worse in some ways. So I was like, I'm seeing the trajectory here. And so she agreed that HRT was a good option for me. And she said, more than anything, regardless of your symptoms, cardiovascular health prevention is what we're prescribing this for you at this point because you are so young. And I do have a family history pretty heavily or in like stroke and heart attack and all these things. So she was like, for that reason alone, yes, you should move forward. So she prescribed me progesterone, which I started taking at night like a week and a half ago. And then the estradiol patch, which I started yesterday. So that's where I'm at now. And I have some questions around various things that I just mentioned, but I will stop talking.
Thank goodness for the validation, right? From a doctor and someone that like really was listening to you and being proactive with you. So awesome on finding somebody that is helping you and on the same page, because that in itself is one of the most difficult things that we see with everyone that we talk to is just finding a doctor that's listening to what you're experiencing. So that's amazing.
I know. I was amazed actually because I was coming in with my guard up. And I also knew that this is my first line of defense. I was like, if this doesn't work, like I'm going somewhere else. Like I found other people that specialize in this. Yes, I'm going to have to pay half my salary to do this, but whatever it takes. But I was so happy that I was like, okay, maybe I don't have to do that. So I think I did get very lucky. She did say a couple of things that like she felt very much like up on the latest knowledge for the most part. And like she did say, I believe you. And I don't feel like I have to retest you a bunch because I believe you. And I know you'll describe your symptoms and that kind of thing. And we'll work together on if dosage isn't right and that kind of thing. So I think I was so surprised that like when she gave me the prescription, I didn't even like question anything. I was like, okay, great. And then now I'm like questioning, is the patch right? Is it the right kind of estrogen? Is it so that kind of stuff? But I was just felt so victorious that I walked away with it that I was like, that's all I could think of, I guess.
I do have one question for you. You mentioned that you were doing some things to alleviate the stress. What are those things?
So I will say in that 3-month period from November to January, I was just trying to survive. So there wasn't a whole lot of stress reduction techniques happening. Prior to that, for me, some meditation I try to do a daily morning meditation practice as well as I can. It doesn't always happen. I'm big into yoga. I had lost my way with it off and on during the COVID years and the young kid years. I used to teach and then I stopped teaching when COVID hit. But in the last year, I've really gotten more back into my yoga practice, and that's been a really great outlet. Any kind of exercise. So I do outside of winter. I love to walk as much as I can in this climate. And then I had started doing reformer Pilates a couple years ago, like once a week. So exercise is definitely an outlet for me, some meditation. And then really, honestly, beyond that, like anytime I can get a coffee with a friend or go out to lunch, like that to me is some of the best stuff. But eating, I definitely feel like I'm affected by sugar and caffeine. So like it was just the perfect storm over the holidays and not sleeping. And I was sleeping with my daughter. I actually still am. We're working on that because she was having seizures like early in the morning a lot. So like sleep wasn't great. So it was just like all the things were happening at once. But prior to that, with this buildup of years, I would say that those are what I look to for stress management. And then I've been in and out of therapy off and on since my daughter was born.
I know you did say something earlier, like, I'll do it, let me jump into action. And I think what you need to do is not.
That's a good point.
And I get it because samesies. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a rip the Band-Aid off person. When I was trying to sort out endometriosis, I did everything at once, right? I did a gluten-free, dairy-free, preservative-free, sugar-free, caffeine-free, whole foods diet for 30 days. And I went from being like a typical American, maybe a little bit healthier, but like eating normal things in that way to doing that. So I feel you. I'm right there with you. I'm like, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and do all of the things. But I think it might be better to not do the things.
Yeah.
What
No, it's a really good point because I've been like, okay, I need to eat more protein. I need to lift weights. I need to get on HRT. I need to seed cycle. I'm like,
Yeah.
I think because it was such a drastic experience, I'm like, oh my God, I got to take actions. But I hear you. I do think I'm probably diving into like too quickly to it all.
Those
And
are
even,
good things. Seed cycling is not something that's like taking up your whole day or anything. Eating protein is absolutely, that's our job in perimenopause is whatever you were doing for a job before is no longer your job. Now eating protein is your job, and that's just your side hustle. No, for sure. But when we're talking about stress reduction, finding peace
Mhm,
is that thing, right? So a yoga practice is great, movement is great, exercise is great, but also napping is great.
mhm.
Having tea in the afternoon and sitting outside and just staring at the clouds is great, right? So it might be a matter of, especially since you've just started HRT and you really don't know what the reaction is going to be yet, it may be really helpful for the asthma symptoms. It may make no difference depending on how it's going. Although, honestly, the way you described it, the allergies with perimenopause spike for so many people. And if you already have allergies, it turning into asthma is not terribly surprising. It sucks,
Yeah, it does.
certainly, but it does happen. So that I'm hoping the HRT will help alleviate some of that for you, having that steady hormone, and especially with the progesterone and the estrogen patch, I'm hoping that will help stabilize that a bit for you as well so that you can have some easier breathing, literally,
Yeah.
figuratively.
I know, and it's tricky because I started the injectable medication Tezspire, which is supposed to like lower your white blood cells and like the EOS levels that like take over your cells when you have so many allergies. So I'm not even a month in. So I wish I had started the HRT first to see how that went, but I guess I'm in bed with both of them. If I start to feel really good, I could always ease off the medication and see. But yeah, I'm really hopeful. It could be unrelated. It feels like I've never had asthma before. I've never had any breathing issues. So it feels like the timing is very interesting when it comes to the hormone picture. But yeah, I'll keep you guys posted on that one. Because to me, it was like, if it did relieve that, like, what an example, what a case study for hormones should be part of the conversation when a woman in their 40s walks in with sudden onset asthma.
Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely. I've never had allergies until I hit perimenopause, and then all of a sudden I get hives multiple times a year. I didn't even know what they were because I had never had anything before. And I'm like, the third time I was Googling, what is happening to me? There was nothing different in the house. So it was just like, what? That's when I started learning about how much allergies kick up for people in perimenopause. And you have estrogen levels like a teenager, right? They spike up high, sometimes go 3 times higher than ever before in your history. And estrogen creates histamine. So there's histamine mast cells in the uterus, and that estrogen overload increases the histamine load. And then because histamine also affects the body, histamine increases your estrogen. So then your estrogen increases your histamine. So then your histamine increases your estrogen. And it's just this like vicious spiral up of increasing the loads of everything. So you have no allergies, suddenly you have allergies. You had allergies before, suddenly they're worse. You had bad allergies before, suddenly you've kicked into asthma. And it makes perfect sense, but it does need to be part of the conversation with your doctors. You were 45, 40s is absolutely a reasonable age to be going through perimenopause symptoms. 51 is the American average of hitting menopause. So that would mean 50 is when people were getting that last period. So 45 to be having irregular periods, absolutely within the realm of normal. And there's people on the other side who are 55 having clockwork ovulation every month. One of the period coaching students is 55 and she has ovulates every single month like clockwork, like nothing has changed. So absolutely within the realm of normal for you. It's just early. And I'm so glad that you started the HRT to protect that cardiovascular health in the long run and bone density and all that stuff that comes along with it. That's such a smart move. So kudos for advocating for yourself and getting in there and started, because your long-term later life health, you is going to be very happy you did it. Like, yay, past me. Well done.
Yeah, and I am so happy too, but I feel like I only had the knowledge to do that because I knew enough to seek it out, and then I got lucky with learning from you guys and some other places and the training I'd done in the past that got me enough knowledge to questioning it. I'm just like, the stuff you guys are doing is so important, and even though I'm enough in that world to seek it out and find it, so many people aren't. And I know that's what you guys been preaching, but even my sister who's 4 years older than me, like I was like, dude, you gotta like sending her all the podcasts and like talking to her about it. And so now I've got her like going to her OB and preparing her with what to ask for next month. Exciting for me, but I also was like disheartening to know that, why is this so hard? Why does this have to be like, why do you have to do a ton of research and advocate for yourself when it shouldn't be like that? So I know I'm preaching to the choir.
When you went and talked to your doctor and you've started it, now your doctor's going to see the results. And the next person that comes in, your doctor's going to go, let's start here.
Good point.
You being one person, and I have to believe that most of the people that go into the medical field wanted to help people at some point in their journey. So I'm hoping that most of us are going to a doctor who goes, look, I had a patient who was showing similar symptoms and we popped her on HRT and the symptoms reduced. So let's start right out of the gate, testing the blood work, seeing where we're at. So I like to think that you going out there and advocating to your doctor and your doctor listening and going, great, I'm on board, let's try it, will now look at the rest of her patients down the line and go, this worked. We're going to start here. We're not going to forget this next time. We're going to see these symptoms and we're going to test for perimenopause before we send you to get scoped or whatever for asthma, right? We're going to start here. So I like to think that every person who listens as just one human being, but goes to their doctor, advocates, and that doctor sees the improvement, will take it to the rest of their patients. So I like to think it's a little butterfly effecty in this way. So good. Yay, you did it. Now you've got your sister on board. That's 2 people. So
Telling everyone. They did have a couple questions. Oh, so
yeah.
couple questions, and I really appreciate you saying that. Do less or slow down, because I do think I need to do that. One thing though that I have never tracked is beyond just, I think I'm ovulating today for various reasons, but I've never done the basal body temperature tracking. And now that I'm so irregular, and now that I'm getting on HRT, like I'm very curious to know if I'm actually ovulating or not and when that may stop if I'm on HRT for next however long. So I so a few weeks ago I bought just like a oral temperature, basal body temperature thermometer. And it's like every reading every day is like wildly different. So I wanted to ask you guys, because I know you've mentioned like the temp drop, like wearable, where I'm at in my journey right now. Is that something you would recommend for trying to track my ovulation?
I love the temp drop because I'm also experiencing similar things where I'm not ovulating every month and like my periods have been shorter than longer, not as long as like the 2 to 3 months, but 30 days, which I wasn't experiencing for a long time. So I find it easier because I was doing what you were doing and I was waking up different times every day. And sometimes I would get up and pee and then be like, oh my God, I forgot to take my temperature. So I find it's just like an easier thing for me to do versus trying to do the other one. And especially with kids, it's just like virtually impossible because they could be they could even just come into bed with you or you're sleeping with your daughter and you hear something and then you're awake, but you're not testing your temperature until you're actually awake. So
Exactly.
I find
Yeah.
it
And
so much
there's
easier.
that since I've been sleeping there, I'll like sometimes lay in bed for half an hour because I don't want to wake her up, even though I'm fully awake, and then I'll think to do it. So that's probably why it's so off.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm going to start that because I would just like to know if and when I'm ovulating. And I do think you guys were talking about like how your body can be trying so hard to ovulate. And I think in that 3 months, I think I did try to ovulate like at least 3 times and probably just finally did it towards the end. And that was one of the reasons I had such horrible symptoms in January. So I do think I'm at that. So to your point, Stasha, because so like with the estrogen, if I'm already like spiking at certain times of the month and then I'm adding on the patch, should the patch like even that out so that I won't be having those spikes? Or are there going to be times where I've just got like the most estrogen ever if I've got both things going on?
Hopefully, it's going to be fulfilling your estrogen receptors, and then you're going to want to focus on fiber. You're going to want to make sure that every single day you are getting in that fiber so that you are pulling out any excess estrogen.
Okay.
And it is one of those kind of toss-up things, but having it not spike so much means that your whole body doesn't have to react and go through the withdrawal as well. It should even out how you're feeling, like symptoms wise. And then your job is just to make sure that you have enough good fats so that there's a place for your body to get rid of everything and that fiber to make sure it's flushing out so that you're having like a really good, healthy poop once, if not twice a day. Like, really shooting for making sure you're pushing everything through and getting rid of it. And you said you weren't drinking anymore or haven't been
Yeah,
recently.
so I'm definitely one of those people where like you're one glass of wine, you're awake 2, 3 in the morning
Yeah.
consistently. I think in the last 4 months I've maybe had 1 or 2 glasses of wine. But yeah, since I've been trying to make these shifts, I'm just like, it's not worth it. So I'm not saying I'm never gonna drink again. I
No.
don't.
But that's one
But
of those
like,
things that like your liver has to prioritize the poison and not the estrogen. So if
right.
you can give your liver all of the opportunities to focus on making sure that the estrogen, the excess is out, then that's a good thing. And then when it plummets, which may be contributing to the rage, the
Yeah.
mood, right? The fatigue, even a little bit of brain fog or forgetfulness, it should help reduce those symptoms and kind of keep you on an even keel. So there is a perk to it where you're getting that nice stable baseline. So you're not going through the withdrawals as drastically. And yeah, it'll probably still spike. But if you're really focusing on making sure you're drinking your water, you're getting your healthy fats, and you're getting your fiber, and you're alleviating your poor liver's other tasks so that it can just do this one thing, then you can really cycle it out much quicker and then come back to that nice stable baseline. So when you do get those spikes, which happen, but it can be eliminated and resolved a little bit quicker and easier, and then without the drastic withdrawal, because usually what happens is we plummet down, and that's where a lot of those symptoms just take over and control. It feels like you've lost control or you've been hijacked by some entity. And that's a lot of times it's just the estrogen withdrawal. It's really crappy. The good news is that when you eventually get off of the estrogen and you're in menopause down the line, everything recalibrates. So you don't have those symptoms anymore because your body adapts to just that low baseline level of estrogen that you have until, you pass. But we do very much like withdrawal from anything. Eventually we get over the withdrawal symptoms and we stabilize and we come back to normal, or what the new normal is. But we do eventually get over those symptoms of perimenopause, which, good news is there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. So that was actually one of my questions, because I was listening to one of your podcasts with, I forget their names, the duo that
Oh, Wise and
Yes, Wise and Well.
Yeah.
And they were saying, oh, you can be on HRT forever. That was a message I got from that. And when I was talking to the OB about, she was like, so just so you know, once you're in your early 60s, we're going to have to take you off of this because your cardiovascular risks increase at that point anyway. And so that was conflicting knowledge. And I felt like that might have been older news. So that's obviously like that's 20 years from now. Not really worrying about it, but I was just like, and maybe and hopefully in 20 years, there'll be a lot more consistency across the knowledge base. But I was just curious what you guys had to say about this, what you were just saying about eventually you won't really need that anymore. What's your stance on that at this point?
I personally, I think it just depends on like family history. I have a very similar family history with heart disease, and the research I've been reading says that it can help reduce that.
Yeah.
So again, hopefully in 20 years or so, there'll be more consistent research. But if you haven't read their book yet, like it's really interesting in terms of the research that they are contributing to, because even my mom, who is in her early 70s, things that are happening with her blood work and like her body, I'm like, oh man, I think like HRT, which wasn't really the same as it is now, would have really helped. So I'm like watching her and being like, oh, like you're having really bad arthritis, you're having like frozen shoulder, different things where I'm like, oh, interesting. Like now that I know this, and I'm too old, like I don't want to do it. I'm like, but on the podcast, they were like, even someone in the 70s can benefit.
Yeah.
But again, our moms got really scared when they were going through menopause and weren't doing any of that because of what the study that had come out that said. So it'll be interesting, but I feel like I won't know until I'm there.
Yeah.
And how I'm feeling personally. I talk to my clients all the time about you've got to really find a doctor that knows your family history, that is monitoring you, and what are the risks and benefits for you personally aging.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the things that obviously following your blood work over time, because a couple of things that I've noticed is my cholesterol over the last couple of years has just started to slowly creep up. And I know that's like common when it comes to perimenopause. I have a strong history of high cholesterol in my family. So it's going to be interesting to see if it changes at all once I'm on the HRT for a while or not. But I'm not like, it's actually my good cholesterol. I always get those confused. HDL, LDL, which is the good one?
HDL is happy cholesterol.
HDL happy. Oh, I love that. So HDL is the one that's creeping up. So it's like the good one, but it's like just underneath the too high level. So I'm going to be watching that. And then also my thyroid, I also have history of thyroid issues in my family. And my thyroid is still within range, according to the standard medical ranges, but it's also starting to shift one way. So I did ask my OB, like, what should we do? Should we do a full thyroid panel? And she's, let's do it in 6 months. Let's like see what happens when you're on the hormones and then revisit it. So that was good that she wanted to do that. She also didn't seem to think that I needed to be tested like my FSH multiple times a year or anything. I think it's going to come down to me just keeping a close eye, seeing how I feel, advocating for myself if I want more blood tests or getting them done myself. But that feels tricky too, as I don't want to be like obsessing over it, but I also I know that because when they see yours, I was like, oh, I know you're good, you're in range. But when I look back at the last 3 years, I'm like, it's definitely moving.
I think that's a smart move, keeping an eye on it. And then I also do think that giving yourself the 6 months with the HRT before you retest is a good idea, because then you can just get it all done at once.
Yeah.
Going on, and then see how you've been reacting to the HRT. So yeah, I definitely would agree with that. I think giving yourself that 6 months to just be and see how things go with this and then retest. And yeah, keep an eye on it. I know I have a history of thyroid things, so does Katie. And when you're testing, even in the lower half of what the normal range is, you have symptoms. You can feel that something's just a little bit off. So it can be frustrating to be not low enough to get the medical support you need, but also not feeling amazing about it. And that's where, if you're still feeling like that, I would ask them to at least do the Hashimoto's testing.
What does that look like? It's like just a
It's a
whole.
blood work. Yeah.
TPO and TPA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you test for Hashimoto's and it comes back negative, but you're still within the range, right? But not hypothyroid, so they're not going to give you medication for it. You can, as long as you don't have Hashimoto's, do kelp supplements or iodine drops. So that, which is what I did for a long time when I had no health insurance. But I was hypothyroid in high school, college, right on the cusp there. So for a long time when I didn't have health insurance, that's what I did. I ate a lot of seaweed salads. I took kelp tabs. I have iodine drops. I still have iodine drops. I know I am back on health insurance, and I'm under I have an actual thyroid medication, but I still sometimes feel a little glug, and I'll put a couple drops of the iodine in my water, and then I actually feel a little bit better, like even that night or the next day. So if you're still hovering at that lower end, they won't give you the medication. But the thing is that iodine makes Hashimoto's worse.
Okay. So you got to.
That's why I say you have access to a doctor test. I've had clients that had hypothyroid symptoms that couldn't afford blood work. I didn't have health insurance. So like the blood work was like $2,000 to test. And we were like, okay, here's what we're going to do. And we would try it. I would go, look, let's try some kelp tablets. And if you feel worse, we stop. You probably have Hashimoto's. And now we're going to move into autoimmune system protocols. We'll do that. If the kelp tablets actually make you feel a little bit more alert, a little less brain foggy, a little bit better, then we're going to go probably hypothyroid, and we're going to stick with the kelp tablets. And if that's not quite enough, we'll move into iodine drops. But you don't want to aggravate it if you don't have to.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my suggestion. If you're still on that lower end in 6 months, and we'll have to have you back after and see where you're at and everything. But that's one way to move around that system so that you're not feeling that lag and that brain fog and those buildup of symptoms if you're still within the range.
What is the range? Where do you remember what your TSH was?
I'll pull it up while we're talking. I meant to get it earlier and I
Just
totally
curious, because I feel like even my sister-in-law asked me yesterday, she showed me her lab. I'm like, I know you're in range, but from what you're sharing with me, I think she's been on medication, but I'm like, I don't know if your medication is supporting where you're at right now with your numbers, if you're still feeling the way you are. Are you cycling your progesterone? Or are you taking it every night?
So I asked about that and she recommended I take it every night. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to remember what the explanation was. Like at this point, since you're so wildly irregular, it would be hard to track like, oh, just doing it at the second 2 weeks of your cycle. I think she said something else and I just can't remember what it was.
That's another reason why that basal body tracking could be really helpful too, so that you can even get more progesterone, like where you might need it more with the estrogen progesterone, since you're taking the HRT.
And you should still see even if you're taking progesterone every day, if you ovulate, it would still increase your body temperature because you would have a baseline of taking that progesterone every day. Add the progesterone from the corpus luteum, it should increase your basal body temperature enough to be noticeable. So
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely going to start that and see what kind of stuff I get. Okay, so I just pulled in my test result. You were asking about the thyroid, Katie?
Yeah, the TSH.
Yeah. So what was interesting is that I got two TSH tests because I had the test from the OB, and then I had old blood work that my regular doctor had given me, and I just hadn't done it yet. So I was like, I'm going to go get that done in case there's any other news that I can report to this OB. So when I got it done on day like 3 to 5 of my cycle, it was actually high. It was actually 4.31. Then I got it again 10 days later, and it was down to 3.77. So I'm actually on the high end. And my mom actually was hyperthyroid in her 40s.
Yeah, I think that's holistically high.
So the OB's recommendation was she gave me the results, or excuse me, the lab order. Yeah, in 6 months, get the full panel done. The other thing I have, besides the higher cholesterol creeping up, I have been having a little bit of the palpitations. Heart palpitations, not like constantly, but not like super significant, but I just like a flutter here and there.
And you're taking the magnesium. Is it what type of magnesium are you taking?
I take the innate response formula, magnesium, 300 milligrams, but I only take one at night. So I'm really only getting 150. And then I just try to get a lot from my diet. Sometimes when my cycle was more regular, I was taking like the full dose at night, like during PMS times to increase it. But I could definitely increase it.
Yeah, I would experiment with that because magnesium can definitely help reduce the heart palpitations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Might be a bit of the hyper,
Yeah.
thyroid, in which case you need to avoid iodine rich.
Okay.
Yeah.
You need to do the
Oh,
opposite.
yeah, I guess that was an important factor in which
Yes.
it was going.
It happens, but it's far more common to be hypo in perimenopause. But yeah, it's definitely avoiding those kinds of things. Iodine, seaweed, sushi.
Okay. Oh, I love sushi.
Yeah, it might be better to make that a special occasion meal.
Good point. Is Hashimoto's only linked to hypo, like low?
Yeah, Graves is the equivalent for hyper. Graves
Okay.
disease, the autoimmune version of hyperthyroid.
Okay.
Yeah.
When my mom had it, she actually did the thing where she like wiped out her thyroid altogether with the iodine treatment. That's not something I would jump into, but yeah, I'll definitely. Do you think 6 months is too long to wait to test again, or that would be like a good time frame?
I think that it could be helpful to what you mentioned at the beginning, like maybe pick 3 things to focus on
Yeah.
and then give your body this support at the same time as you're trying the HRT and then doing the blood work in 6 months, I think could actually give you not a reset, but a renourishment, like really focusing on the rest component, the HRT, the fiber. Talk to us about protein because I know we mentioned at the very beginning about it being our full-time job, but how are you feeling about just getting enough protein in? I know you're started lifting weights, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, I feel pretty good. Back in my 20s, I did many vegan stints and very healthy smoothies, juices, all the salads until dinner, all that stuff. But in more recent years, I've noticed the change in my body. I never used to understand, or my mom or like my mother and I'll be like, I have to have protein. I'm like, I didn't get it, and now I get it. So I crave it. I need it. I feel like that like low blood sugar response if I don't have it enough. So I probably could do more at breakfast. Like I always eat a good breakfast. I do have protein. I've been doing collagen for a good year or so. So I've started doing more of that like earlier in the morning if I just can't get it any other way. I do a lot of like oats and chia and that kind of stuff, or just whole grain breads with nut butter. Like I eat a ton of nut butter. I eat a good amount of beans. I don't like beans are not really my favorite thing, but I try to get them in when I can. But just like eating plenty of fish and chicken and stuff like that. I haven't eaten red meat since I was 16, so I don't see myself changing that. But yeah, I'm trying to pay attention. I haven't ever tracked it, so I'd be curious to do like one of the apps and just like actually track how much protein and how much fiber I'm getting, because I think I'm getting a lot, but I actually don't know exactly what I'm getting.
Yeah. MyFitnessPal is so easy for that. Yeah, and it's free. I think that's a great place to start. But I would really focus on trying to get protein for like that might just be the protein for breakfast, making sure you're getting enough fiber, resting. Because one of my questions is, do you feel rested when you wake up? Are you actually getting deep sleep at the moment? I know like you have a lot of things going on, but do you feel rested?
Honestly, the second I started progesterone, I'm sleeping like way deeper,
Yeah.
undeniably. And I'm only waking up. If I'm waking up, it's because my daughter, like, she has a cold this week. So she's like snoring and coughing in the night. But like, I'll wake up and be like, oh, wow, I just had a really deep stretch. And then I'll fall back asleep and I'm like dreaming like crazy. So that in itself is helping, getting to the point where we're probably going to get her back in her own room finally. So that will help a lot. But I think prior to even that, like her sleeping with me, sleep has never been horrible for me, but definitely like can't do any kind of caffeine. Like I do a green tea at breakfast, which I just love. I don't want to give it up. It's low caffeine, but I know it's a little, that's it for the day. If I were to have anything afternoon, I wouldn't sleep. Alcohol, same thing, but disrupts my sleep. So all of that out of the picture, I definitely I sleep well, except PMS time or the full moon. Nope.
Yeah.
Not sleeping. And that's when I'm like really focusing on the magnesium and stuff. But no, not. I'm like, I hope this progesterone thing lasts. It's not just like a newbie thing because it's definitely helping a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah, I found the same thing when I started
Same.
progesterone. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm sleeping so much better now. Actually, the Temp Drop Pro also tracks sleep. So if
Oh,
you
really?
upgrade to the Pro version, it tracks your sleep. And sometimes I am surprised that I have a lighter sleep than I necessarily thought. So it can be an interesting extra perk to it to see, are you really in that deep sleep or are you a little bit higher level?
Yeah. And the other thing I'm finding interesting that you guys have been talking about is just working with your cycle. And I have a full-time job in marketing in a tech company right now, and it's very non-conducive to that lifestyle. So I've been considering small ways that I can, and I've always been one to like really try to be as much in control as my schedule as I can. And like yesterday, I was planning to go to a yoga class at noon and I woke up and I was just like, I have nothing. I have no contribution to my work right now. So I'm going to go to the 9 a.m. class and then come back and see what I got. And that worked out great. So because I didn't have meetings yesterday morning, I was able to do that. But that's not always the case. But I'm just finding it really interesting because I have some other projects outside of work that I've been really passionate about that I had to take a hold on because of the last few months of my family health issues. So now I'm starting to think about like, how am I going to be able to handle all of this safely and healthfully and productively? So that's been something I've been thinking about. Okay, can I take 1 week a month and put aside a few hours when I know I'm going to be like, and I'm hoping with HRT, I'll have some more regularity in my cycle so that I can do that better. But yeah, it's just an interesting concept that I've been considering.
I think that would be really interesting to come back to in 6 months and see how the HRT is doing. Like I saw Stasha like light up too as I was mentioning that. So I think that could be really interesting. I feel like for the time being, with less is more.
Yeah.
Think of,
Maybe
and
I
you
am
might already be
hyperthyroid
doing
because I'm
it.
like,
Yeah. Like
do it all.
less is more for everyone listening too. It really is. It's something that I'm trying to really practice as well. Stash and I talk about this all the time. Everybody listen to our work and flow series because it can be really beneficial. But what do you think based on our conversation, where your headspace is at right now? What makes the most sense for you to like really just three things?
Okay. So I don't have to use HRT because I'm already on it, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I think tracking the basal body temperature, I'd like to start doing that because I think that'll help me just understand what's going on and for the long-term game. And then I think also tracking like the food intake so that I can have an idea where I am with the fiber and the protein. And your explanation of the fiber was actually really helpful, Stasha, because I hadn't really understood it in that way of how it's like pulling out the extra estrogens. I didn't realize like that was the reason for the fiber talk all the time. So that is something, I think that's the second thing. And then the third thing, I think they're just like adopting the concept of trying to slow down and know that this is a long game and I can't fix it overnight, even though I want to. But that I've already recognizing like I'm already taking some really positive action steps and then I'll probably have to tweak things along the way.
100%.
Absolutely. I'm wondering with the asthma, how does deep breathing feel for you? Can you take 3 deep breaths throughout the day as just a moment of breath work, of nothingness?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So what's interesting with my asthma is I have full lung capacity, like I'm able to fill my lungs really well. It's the intake, like I feel it up in here, like in the throat, back of the throat. So that's very frustrating. 'Cause I'm like, okay, I know I can get the breaths, but it's hard to get them in and out. But I have been trying to incorporate breathing in my day. And one thing I started just in the last 3 weeks, usually it was like if I was going to do any meditation or breath work, it would be first thing in the morning, like before I even get out of bed. And now with my daughter sleeping with me, that's been harder. So what I've started doing is the second I get her off to school, my husband takes her to school. So I'm like, get her out the door. I usually have a little bit of my tea left and I just go in the living room and I sit down in the chair and I just like breathe and sit for a few minutes of quiet. Cause normally I would just like jump right into work or getting changed or whatever. I'm like, I can handle 5 minutes in a chair before I take on the rest of the day. And that's been really nice. So I'm trying to make more of that of a practice. And also knowing, okay, if the morning thing didn't work out or I have to go right to a meeting, it's okay, that's okay. I can do it at lunchtime or I can do it. Just finding its way in there. But to your point, yes, I think it is helpful, especially when I'm just like sitting calmly, because it's when I'm talking or I'm walking up and down the stairs is when the breath stuff starts to really get challenging. But if I'm just relaxed and calm, it's not really an issue.
Yeah. So I keep doing the meditation and that kind of thing. But when you're sitting in a meeting at work, can you do a little subtle 4-7-8 breathe, 3 rounds? Or can you do a subtle, just 3 deep breaths, frankly, just stop and take 3 deep. So rather, not to say don't sit and have a meditation time, but can we keep the stress, the cortisol, a little bit more stable throughout the day by just stopping and taking a couple of deep breaths in a meeting, on the phone, sitting at the desk, in the car on the way home, before you go into the grocery store, whatever it is, just little checkpoints throughout the day where you can just stop and take some breaths, because that can really help reduce cortisol stress responses. And it's easy and it doesn't take time and it's not an extra thing. And you don't have to have you don't have to be in a yoga class. You don't have to be in the right clothes. You don't have to have people around. I used to do this when I bartended. I would just turn around when I was like mixing drinks or at the register or something. And I do a couple of quick 4-7-8 breaths just to bring the crazy down a little bit. But I was still at the bar bartending. So in the midst of all the chaos, trying to be my own little eye of the storm, calm spot in the center.
No, I love that because I do find that particularly if I'm in work mode or on a meeting or whatever, like I'm using every second possible to multitask. Even if I'm like actively in a meeting, I'm also checking my emails and also, and I think part of that comes from, especially now since I've been sleeping with my daughter, because we go to bed at 8 o'clock and then we get up at 6:37. So I'm awake a lot of that time. So instead of reading, because like the lights are off, I'm like listening to a podcast and that's great. And then I turn it off and then I have my nighttime. But there's definitely times where I'm awake much earlier than her and I'm just kind of either doing my meditation or trying to utilize that time. But I think so because of that, my hours in my day to be productive seem so short every day now. So yes, I need to get my daughter back in her bed. I realize that. I think that I always have this sense right now that are like, I got to use every minute of every day to the max. Or I'm afraid I'm going to get behind on things. I think that's so many people feel that way. But I think you don't like to that point of even if you are actively doing something, doesn't mean you still can't take those breaths.
The breathing.
Yeah. Use that. Yeah. Use the multitasking in a more healthy way. So thank you for that. I like that.
Absolutely. I love it. Fantastic.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll definitely have you back in 6 months. So I'm really curious to see how things are going, shifting and changing. And obviously reach out to us in the meantime if you have questions or just to let us know that your wins and celebrations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm really hopeful that I'll have good news to share in 6 months.
Yes. And thank you everybody for listening. We will see you on the next episode of Period Besties. Bye for now.
A big shout out and thank you to our sponsors for today's episode, Period Coaching School and Katie Bresek Wellness.
Thanks to you, our favorite bestie, for listening to the Period Besties podcast. where no topic is TMI. And of course, share this episode with your besties.
Remember to leave us a 5-star review, nothing less than the best for us besties, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can follow us on Instagram at Stasha Washburn and at Katie Bresak, or email us at periodbestiespodcast@gmail.com.
Check out more about us at katiebresak.com and periodcoachingschool.com. And of course, check the show notes for free goodies and extras that support this episode.
We'll see you on the next episode.
Bye for now, besties.